guys, and welcome back to Hike Oregon. Today I'm going to talk about how to choose your big 3 items, meaning your tent, your sleep system, and your backpacking backpack. First, let's just start off with the thing you're going to carry all your gear in. So let's start off with the backpack. Finding the right backpacking backpack is crucial and can be quite difficult. My first tip is to get measured. So that means going to your local outfitter and getting your torso measured. You can't do much without knowing your torso measurement because you won't know what size backpack to get. And if you do end up choosing a cottage company or a smaller company where you can't actually try on the backpack, you will have to know your exact torso size because they will make it to fit your torso size. But I'll get back into that in a little bit. After you've figured out your torso measurement, you're going to want to figure out what type of backpack is going to suit your needs. So are you a long distance hiker? Are you going to be going on the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail? Are you doing hundreds and hundreds of miles? What kind of weight are you carrying? Are you going to be going through a lot of brush, like unmaintained trails? Are you going to be bushwhacking? Does the backpack need to be waterproof? Are you going into areas where there's a lot of rain? Those are all things that you need to consider, and maybe just write down a list what kinds of trips this backpack is going to go on with you, and then that will kind of narrow things down. So if you're wanting to through hike a long distance trail like the Appalachian Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, or the Pacific Crest Trail, it is probably in your best interest to try and find something that's pretty lightweight. But it is definitely not necessary, and I think that comfort is the overall key when looking for a backpack. A lot of the ultralight backpacks are unfortunately not sold in most local outfitters like REI, for example. REI carries major brands like Osprey, Gregory, Deuter, and their own REI brand of backpacks. They carry some other ones, but those are the major brands that they carry. None of those are going to be super ultralight, meaning 2 pounds or less. A lot of cottage companies like ULA, Z-Packs, Mountain Laurel Designs, Hyperlight Mountain Gear, those are all cottage companies, meaning they are small companies. They don't have storefronts. They're mainly online orders only, and they make things to fit you, which is the part about it that is really awesome. So if you want to order from a cottage company, you will send in your measurements, you will select if you want any extras on the backpack, and then they will make the custom backpack for you. A lot of these backpacks are made out of some sort of Cuban fiber, and that is what makes them super lightweight. They also have minimal zippers and other frills and attachments. Cuban fiber can be pretty expensive, which is why a lot of these backpacks from cottage companies generally are more expensive than backpacks from REI, from the brands like Osprey, Deuter, and Gregory. There's many pros and cons for each type of backpack. I'm not going to get into that in this video. This is just an overview on some tips and tricks for you for getting your big 3 items set up. I did want to mention that REI has a great return policy, meaning that if you do buy a backpack and you try it on in the store and you walk around and it's comfortable, but then you load all your gear into it and you take it out and it rubs somewhere or it's actually not that comfortable, you can take it back, no questions asked, for up to a year and return it or exchange it. So that is kind of the beauty about buying from a company like REI, is that you have that return and exchange policy. And I will let you know that if you are new to backpacking, you may not find the perfect backpack right away. My friend Randy over at Now Hike This, she tried out probably 5 or 6 backpacks before she found one that was really comfortable for her body. So just keep that in mind. After you find your backpack, let's move on to your tent. So some things to keep in mind when looking for a tent is how many people are going to be sleeping in it. Again, what kind of weather are you going to be taking it into? Are you going to need a super heavy-duty rain fly? Can it be more of a mesh tent? All of those things are things to consider. What area you're going into? Do you need to be super protected against bugs, or can it be more of an open tent? Are there space limitations at the camp area that you're going to? Some tents are really easy and simple to put up and break down. Are you willing to spend a little bit more time to get it just right? I know some tents set up with trekking poles. They might be a little bit harder to set up than the tents that come with poles. And then of course there's different types of tents. There's like the long multi-room tents, which I don't recommend taking that on a backpacking trip. Those are super heavy. And then there's the typical dome tent that you see. There's like the 3.5 dome tent that you see. Those are very popular. And then there's the tent hammock system too. So that's another thing to consider. Do you not want to sleep on the ground? Are you in an area where there's lots of critters? You don't really want to sleep on the ground. If you're not a stomach sleeper, hammock camping is actually pretty lightweight and can be a really good alternative to a tent. And then there's also the bivy sack. So if you don't need a lot of space, if you don't want to keep your backpack in your tent, you don't want any gear, you don't have a dog, you don't have a partner that you're going with or kids, bivy sack might be the way to go. And again, it all depends on your preference, your budget, your weight capacity, how much weight you want to carry. Those are all things that you need to consider when purchasing a tent. I know there are so many options out there. Some great brands that I recommend are Big Agnes. I highly recommend Big Agnes. They are an awesome company and they make fantastic tents that are pretty lightweight. Six Moons Designs makes great tents as well. And then if you are on somewhat of a budget, I highly recommend checking out some of the REI tents. They are a little on the heavier side, but they look a lot like Big Agnes tents. A lot of them are the half dome or the dome tents. They're super roomy. They're super quick and easy to set up, and the designs on their tents are really well thought out for backpackers and campers. And then last but not least, your sleep system. If you are sleeping in a tent, you will most likely need a sleeping pad. Again, you need to consider the conditions that you're going in. That's the most important thing to consider when looking for a sleeping pad. I do have a video all about sleeping pads. I will link that right here, as well as in the more info section below. I talk all about R value and the things you need to know when purchasing a sleeping pad. And I'll go through all the different kinds of sleeping pads, closed cell, open cell, that kind of thing. So I highly recommend anything from Big Agnes also makes pretty good sleeping pads. Thermarest, of course, is probably the biggest known sleeping pad company, but they can be pretty spendy, especially if you're going with a mat that you blow up. They can be pretty spendy. Again, you also have to consider the length of your trip, as well as if you are a stomach or side or back sleeper. That is not something that I considered before I went on a trip, and I ended up getting bruising on my hip bones because my mat was a little too thin. That is something to consider. If you are a heavier person or if you are a super thin person, you may consider getting one of those blow up mats where you have some nice cushion. And then your sleeping bag. So there's sleeping bags and there's sleeping quilts. I know a lot of people don't feel comfortable in sleeping bags because of the mummy effect. You know, some sleeping bags feel very constricting and your feet are constricted, and a lot of people don't like that, and I totally understand that. I move around a lot when I sleep, and sometimes the sleeping bag can be a little annoying because you can't stretch out, you can't move your legs apart or anything like that. So that is something to consider. You might want to get a sleeping quilt. It is pretty much just a sleeping bag that can open up all the way like a comforter. So that's something you might want to consider. And then you also have to consider if you want a down sleeping bag or a synthetic sleeping bag. Synthetic sleeping bags are definitely much cheaper, but they are a lot heavier. So again, consider your budget and how much weight you want to carry. Down sleeping bags are much more expensive, but much lighter, and that's actually a great place to save a lot of weight. For example, my REI synthetic sleeping bag was a 24-degree bag and it weighed over 3 pounds. My new sleeping bag is a Z-Packs 900 fill down bag and it weighs right around a pound. So I saved 2 pounds by just upgrading a sleeping bag. Now, the price difference is quite significant, so again, consider your budget. Another thing to think about when looking for a sleeping bag and thinking about synthetic versus down is again what area you're going to be in. If you're in the Pacific Northwest and you think you're going to be doing a lot of fall, spring, and winter backpacking, you probably want to get a synthetic sleeping bag as there will be a lot of moisture and rain and really damp snow. So you probably don't want a down sleeping bag. If you're only hiking in the summer in the Pacific Northwest, or if you're hiking somewhere more dry, then definitely consider getting a down sleeping bag and saving some of that weight. Well guys, that is all I have for you today. I know I can go way more in depth in all 3 of these categories. However, I just wanted to make a quick video with some tips and things to keep in mind when you are looking for your big 3 items. Backpacking season is coming up, and I know a lot of people are shopping and getting their gear ready for the season. So let me know if you have questions about any specific gear items. I'd be happy to share some of my experiences with different gear. Also, if you have any tips and ideas on finding the perfect backpack, sleeping bag, or tent, just comment down below. I'd love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next adventure.